There's definitely. But we know my
All right, we're
buildings.
ready. Go ahead.
Okay, next slide. Next slide.
Okay, now.
So basically, the 80s, a lot of new music and technology that were introduced, and video games started becoming kind of a thing, like the Super Mario Brothers and Pac-Man. There were a lot of like pretty good TV shows and movies that we still watch nowadays. Okay, Noah? And a lot of people would wear like shoulder pads, power suits, and a lot more. And a lot of people would kind of wear what I'm wearing, like real tight clothing. And yeah, so basically the 80s was pretty much one of the most electric decades in fashion. There were many new styles of music that were introduced, and many popular musicians in that time as well. Next slide. So,
A couple foods in the 80s. Potato skins were popular. Sushi was popular. Jello, fruit roll-ups, bagels, steak. Kind of like what we eat today.
so it's just some commercials from the 80s.
The following does not necessarily reflect the opinion of Burger King.
By offering 3 new burgers, Burger King only proves they'll stop at nothing to make America hungry. 2 juicy flame broiled patties, okay, but a pizza double burger with mozzarella, a taco double burger with jalapeno cheese and taco sauce, and the mushroom double Swiss burger with tender mushrooms. Burger King, you've gone too far.
Has Burger King gone too far with their 3 new double burgers? Maybe, but only for a limited time.
It tastes like vanilla ice cream cones or chocolate chip.
A crispy part
Of this nutritious breakfast. No storm keeps ice cream donuts. Unreal. Your ice cream cones.
ice cream cone cereal.
So, some literature from the 80s. There's one book by Raymond Carver. It's called What We Talk About When We Talk About Love in 1981. And personally, I've never heard of any of these books except for Lonesome Dove. But anyway, Carver's famous for writing stories that create meaning through their form, and didn't really add anything to that. So the next one is The Color Purple in 1982 by Alice Walker. This book was about impoverished black women and lesbian relationships, so I guess people liked that stuff back in the day. Take this one here.
All right, the next book is Neuromancer by William Gibson. This book, Cory Doctorow told The Guardian's remains a vividly imaged allegory from the world in the 1980s, when the first seeds of the massive gold blast, wealth, spentiary were planted, and when the inchoate rumblings of technological rebellion were first felt.
Then this last one from Larry McMurtry, The Lonesome Dove. This is like the most popular book in the 80s, and the New York Times named it the first great cowboy novel.
Some influential people from the 80s. Michael Jackson, he's dead. Joe Montana, still alive. Magic Johnson, still alive. Michael J. Fox, who's still alive. And Ronald Reagan, who is not alive.
So, a lot of days we think of Michael Jackson, we see his high-pitched shrieks and his twirls and the moonwalk that he did, and it really kind of changed music. And it's, the mark he made is just enough to make him a legend, but that's not all people remember him for. He lent a hand towards world issues such as climate change, and he donated to organizations that support AIDS and cancer research. And he supported causes like the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. How did Michael Jackson influence fashion? I'll tell you. So, with his musical influence also came his impact on fashion. So, from high fashion to fast fashion touches of his eccentric style that still influence the industry today. And on top of that, many artists like Justin Bieber and Kanye West have kind of copied some of his moves and made it their own style. So maybe they copied him.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
I don't know how he does it.
One of my personal favorites. Next up is Joe Montana. He was the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers for 16 seasons, and in that span, he won 4 Super Bowls. A lot of people still today think he's the greatest quarterback of all time. Yeah, he played for the Chiefs for a couple years as well, and
No Super Bowls there, obviously, because the Chiefs. Here he is, tossing a touchdown, tossing it up.
The world tells you to grow up. Here, you never have to.
Montana, Rice, he's open.
Look at
No flags are down.
He's going for the 80s. I can't believe
You talk about something quiet for Kansas City, 5 minutes ago, it gets Jerry Rice out there, Mark Collins, covered all day with Burley. Montana, you worry, could he throw the ball?
We're in the second division.
Over 10 yards. He hits the
I'll
one
take
to
Tom
Jerry
Brady.
Rice that breaks the game wide open. 70.
So this was Magic Johnson, and yes, he is still alive. So he was the star point guard for the Los Angeles Lakers during the 1980s. During that time, he won 4 NBA titles, and during his 13-year NBA career, until he came out and said he had HIV in 1991, so he had to stop. What an ending. Seriously, say it.
There's Magic tossing up a three.
Green wisely spins it back out. 8 on the shot clock. Magic for 3, Willis. Second night, Josephine. How about that shot? How about that shot? And how about this comeback? It looks like a bomb scare is going off in the Omni.
Next up, we got Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox was one of the more well-known actors of the 80s.
Somehow still alive.
He was in some of the classics that we know today, like Back to the Future and Teen Wolf. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1991 at 29 and disclosed his condition to the public in 1998. He partly retired from acting in 2000 as the symptoms of his disease worsened.
So here's Ronald Reagan, and we forgot to include it, but he's dead. But he was the 40th president of the United States, and is looked at today as one of the most important presidents in our history. He served 2 terms and was president from 1981 to 1989. And on June 5th, 2004, he died after having suffered from Alzheimer's disease for nearly a decade. Ronald Reagan was president during the Cold War with Russia, and at first, not very many people took him serious as a president because of his lack of experience in politics. And before becoming a president, he was actually a Hollywood actor.
Here's some good movies from the 80s. We got National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation in 1989, The Breakfast Club in 1985, and E.T. in 1982. First up, we got Christmas Vacation.
So basically, the holidays are coming up, and Clark Griswold, he wants to have the perfect family Christmas, but him and his wife's side of the family, they don't really get along too well. But they decide, we'll do it anyway. But their family comes over, and things are just going wrong. They're arguing, and Clark doesn't get his bonus from work that he's been counting on. And then his redneck cousin Eddie shows up, and his redneck cousin Eddie lives in an RV, and he's not really coordinated.
Oh, he captured his boss.
He kidnapped his boss near the end, and then Clark actually ended up getting his bonus after that. So there's a good life lesson. If you don't get your bonus, kidnap your boss. But, yeah, near the end, things finally started going well, and all sorts of things. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the actors was, Chevy Chase. He was Clark Griswold. Beverly D'Angelo was Ellen Griswold, which was Clark's wife. And Randy Quaid is cousin Eddie, and Juliette Lewis is Clark's daughter Audrey. And Johnny Galecki is Clark's son named Russ, and then Brian Doyle Murray was Clark's boss.
And here's Clark tossing up a tree.
Right up there.
There he is.
Do you think there's enough room for the angel?
Oh, sure, honey. I have a little more trimming to do, but that won't be a problem. Ready?
Ready.
I give you the Griswold family Christmas. A lot of sap in here. Looks great. A little full.
Next up is The Breakfast Club. The Breakfast Club is a movie about 5 high school students that are all completely different from each other, and they have to spend a day with each other in detention. It earned $51.5 million on a $1 million budget, and is now one of the most memorable movies from the 80s. The actors in it are Judd Nelson, who is John Bender, Ali Sheedy, who is Allison Reynolds, Molly Ringwald, who is Claire, Emilio, huh?
Emilio's how you pronounce that.
And Anthony Michael Hall, who is Brian Johnson.
So the next one was E.T., made in 1982. So this was released on June the 11th of 1982 and made around $792 million. And the movie blew up a lot in the 80s, and it's become one of the most well-known movies in the United States. So some actors in this movie, Drew Barrymore was Gertie, Henry Thomas was Elliot, and Robert McNaughton was Michael, Dee Wallace was Mary, and Erica Eleniak was the pretty girl, I guess. So some good bands from the 80s are Motley Crue, Metallica, and Guns N' Roses.
Motley Crue is an American heavy metal band that was formed in Los Angeles in 1981. The group was founded by the bassist Nikki Sixx, drummer Tommy Lee, lead singer Vince Neil, and the lead guitarist Mick Mars. Motley Crue has sold over 100 million albums worldwide, making them one of the best-selling bands of all time.
So this next one is Metallica, and I think Dylan listened to this band quite a bit actually. So you know he'd like to be here to see it, but he got himself in a little bind, so. But anyway, Metallica is an American heavy metal band, and this band was formed in 1981 in Los Angeles by drummer Lars Ulrich and vocalist / guitarist James Hetfield, and has been based in San Francisco, California for most of its career.
Next band is Guns N' Roses, often abbreviated as GNR. It's an American hard rock band from Los Angeles, California, formed in 1985. When they signed to Geffen Records in 1986, the band comprised vocalist Axl Rose, lead guitarist / rhythmic guitarist Izzy Stradlin, and the bassist Duff McKagan, and drummer Stephen Alden.
So some popular musicians were Prince, John Lennon, and Michael Jackson, but we already kind of talked a little about Michael Jackson. So Prince Rogers Nelson was an American singer, songwriter, musician, record producer, actor, and filmmaker. With a career spanning 4 decades, Prince was known for his eclectic work, flamboyant stage presence, amazing fashion sense, his use of makeup, and a wide vocal range.
John Lennon, MEB, was an American singer, songwriter, and peace advocate who co-founded the Beatles and the most commercially successful band in the history of popular music. He and fellow member Paul McCartney formed a much celebrated songwriting partnership. There's some 80s fashion right here.
So mullets, like they say, business right here in the front, and back here, you just kind of let it go wild. A lot of people would wear ripped jeans, pretty common in the 80s. Men and women both were seen a lot wearing ripped jeans. And then there, spandex, which this shirt kind of feels like spandex, but, headbands, you wear them around your head, people think you're cool. Then big hair was basically just where people would take their hair and do that. Next slide.
The 80s brick phone. Brick mobile phones from the 80s have always been talked about. They were very expensive when new, and at first used only by top executives and city traders. By the end of the decade, they were an invaluable business tool for traveling salesmen, builders, and delivery drivers as well. But we're out of reach for personal use for most people. The handheld mobile, as opposed to a heavy transportable, essentially a handset attached to a 12V car battery, was a status symbol for yuppies in the 80s, and a source of irritation on trains and in restaurants for everyone else.
So some slang in the 80s was choice. If you made a good, correct decision, somebody would say, yeah, choice. And if you did something good, they'd say bad. And if you did something cool, it was gnarly. Then if you're having a cow, you're just kind of emotional or upset, or like, if dad doesn't see that you cleaned your room, he's gonna have a cow. And then if you're wrong about something, somebody says, oh, not even, and then grody basically just means gross.
Historical events from the 80s. On May 22nd of 1980, the video game Pac-Man was released. In 1983, Microsoft released Word. In 1983, Nintendo introduced Super Mario Bros. On December 2nd of 1983, Michael Jackson released the song Thriller, one of his most popular songs ever. On September 3rd of 1985, Bob Baller discovers the wreck of the Titanic. Back to the Future came out in 1985, we already talked about that. In 1989, the Game Boy was released. And in 1989, the internet went global.
So, some entertainment back from the 80s. So, CDs made their debut early in the 80s, and they caught on pretty fast. And people would just eventually start trashing their music records for the new discs. And then, as well as TV, it blew up a lot in the 80s with all sorts of new reality shows and cartoons showing things like The Simpsons, The Cosby Show, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And then Full House was also kind of started coming out near the early 80s, or late 80s. And then the arcade blew up for kids in the 80s when it came out, and kids wanted to make enough money to spend tokens at the arcade and spend hours a day playing games like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. And then the mall was basically like the main hangout place in the 80s, so you knew you were cool if you were invited to the mall to hang out with your friends.
Fads of the 80s were big hair, the Rubik's Cube, the boombox, slap bracelets, and the Cush ball.
So the Rubik's Cube was originally designed in 1974, and people called that the Magic Cube. And eventually in 1980, it was renamed to the Rubik's Cube, and then it went on to being one of the world's best-selling toys. The Rubik's Cube was so popular that more than 100 million of them were sold. I need to learn this. But they were sold between 1980 and 1982, and then 300 million of them have been sold worldwide.
That's the same amount as yours.
Right.
The boombox, known by names such as the Jambox and the Ghetto Blaster, is a transistorized portable music player featuring one or two cassette tape recorders / players and AM/FM radio, generally with a carrying handle. Beginning in the mid-1980s, a CD player was often included.
So slap bracelets, you know, can't really beat just taking on your favorite bracelet, just snapping it or slapping it over your wrist. Then you can walk around the halls of your school just showing off your bracelets.
Bless you.
Thanks.
Fun fact, the creator of Cush Ball invented the Cush Ball because his kids could not master playing catch.
That's pretty embarrassing.
The Cush Ball even had its own comic series for a while. Another fun fact, a woman got sued after getting hit in the face by a Cush Ball on Rosie O'Donnell's talk show.
So, to conclude kind of everything, the 80s will always be remembered for things like fashion, music, and kind of new technology being introduced. And, you know, there's a lot of things from the 80s that are still kind of used today. You know, I still play Super Mario Bros. Today. And then,
Me too.
yeah, you do too, see?
Well, they have Final Fantasy published in 1980s.
Well, people do that too. And, but, you know, the cell phone kind of shows, kind of came along in the 80s. Now cell phones have really evolved, so the 80s really kind of started a lot of this. And that's all. Anything you'd like to add, Noah?
I don't think there's anything that I'd like to add. But there is one more slide at the end.
Wait, is there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, maybe the last slide. So, yeah, this is kind of dedicated to Dylan. We wish he was standing right here with us right now, but got himself a little bind, so
Picture was taken last year.
taken last year. That's special. But, you know, we'll miss Dylan. Thank you.
He's not dead though.
He's not dead. He's not dead.
People going home like.